Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Accelerator. My name is Michael Conniff. I'll be your host. This is a podcast devoted to startups, founders, entrepreneurs, innovative people in the world, and also the VCs, investors, family offices, accelerators, incubators that serve them. We're on all the major platforms, including Apple. That's a good one. Adobe, Audible, and others that don't start with A, and also on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe and like us if you like us, and keep listening. We really appreciate that. Today we are joined by Ben Labra. He's the CEO and co-founder of Gesture. Gesture is a social gifting platform, which we'll explain in just a moment. Welcome, Ben. Great to have you on the Accelerator.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Happy holidays.
Yeah, and we met at an Expert Dojo event at the Lipstick Building in New York, which is sounds more glamorous than it actually is, but but it was a lot of fun. A lot of great founders. It's really impressive what Dojo and Brian McMahon have done, and their focus on growth. So I think we have to start by explaining what a social gifting platform is, and I'll use your slogan, which I love actually, which is happiness delivered. So tell us a little bit about what it is first, if you don't mind, and then we'll get into kind of how the idea evolved.
Sure. So Gesture is sort of almost a full blown e-commerce shopping application that combines logistics into that. So sort of the delivery process, and it's mainly focused around gifting in all sorts of different aspects, I guess. So you can send flowers, wine, champagne, cigars, different types of specialty spirits and those sort of things. But the cool thing about Gesture is you don't need any sort of recipient address at all. You can pretty much send anybody anything with just the info that you have, whether it's a phone number or an email. And if you don't have that, you can essentially jump onto any social media platform and gift them right through their DM platform. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, logistics actually is important because you own your logistics network, which is essentially the correct me if I'm wrong, but the software, the infrastructure, and the delivery. The people you call G runners, and I think you've got close to 1,000 of those out there already. So, why is it so important to own and control your own logistics platform?
Yeah. So in the world of e-commerce, everybody, with the exception of Amazon, sort of relies on, just sort of second, third party delivery processes. And, before Gesture came along, if you were to send, go online, pick some flowers, send it, you were sort of at the mercy of just kind of the abyss, kind of black space out there. And, some we have this joke that sometimes people's flowers or their bottle of wine is still orbiting the moon at times and in space. And so with logistics,
Where did it go? Right.
yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, where is it? And so by really controlling both the consumer, the application, and then the driver app, as we like to call it, the same way Uber has theirs, you have almost you provide the customer a full sense of transparency, and and also the control is better, and the experience is better, and we can deliver things almost in as little as 30 minutes sometimes. So it's super fast last mile delivery because we own that logistics piece.
And I think you're in 150 cities now. Is that right?
Yeah, so we essentially can deliver pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Some we have runners that'll essentially do it that are basically prepared to receive those orders and fulfill them. And then in some of the smaller places, like if you were to order just kind of in the middle of nowhere, Alaska or Texas, we would essentially have to work with either maybe a third party or a ship option. But we can
But
pretty much
you're set up to do that, though. It sounds like you're set up.
yeah. We've delivered to the smallest part in Puerto Rico, actually, and it was successful. So,
Wow, it sounds like this sounds really difficult. So is it as difficult as it sounds?
I I would say when uh
You're the
when we
wrong
were in
person to ask, probably, but I've got to ask you.
no, it's so funny because it's when we first started to create Gesture, it was shopping, gifting, super sort of just a kind of a frictionless process. And then one day I sort of like went to sleep and woke up and I'm like, we're a full blown logistics company. I mean, holy cow, like we own the logistics piece, and I'm just like, where did that happen? And it's one of those things where it's kind of like the accidental sort of entrepreneur sort of story where you kind of just fall into that process. And yeah, it is difficult. It's a lot more than what we essentially signed up for, but yeah, we're doing great so far.
So what are the implications of owning the logistics? So this is the famous or infamous last mile of delivery, I guess you could call it. The part that's the hardest for many companies. Of course, Amazon delivers like this, the Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, DHL, and so on. But what are the implications for you? I may be jumping the gun a little bit, but beyond gifting, it seems like if you have this ability to deliver just about anything, that you could become, the part of a very important part of a fulfillment strategy for another player that might be unrelated to gifting. Is that something that you think about, plan
Yeah,
on?
100%, absolutely. And we've sort of in the last, honestly, probably the past month, we've almost started pivoting and shifting our model a little bit to just becoming more of a, like, as I mentioned at the very beginning, a sort of full sort of scale shopping application versus gifting, and just gifting, where we almost are moving towards a marketplace type of sort of business model, where we can sell other people's products on the app itself versus just the products that we think. So that's one element. And then another piece is, yes, it's we have ultimately utilized and monetized our logistics software in lots of different ways, where we sort of are not just kind of being a fulfillment partner for as a backup to Amazon and things like that. We've actually monetized our logistics piece in a much different way, where we've made it easy for brands, like, let's just say, a tequila brand, for instance, that we're essentially working with currently. They're a little bit newer, and we've given them sort of an outlet to get the product, their actual tangible physical product, into people's hands, utilizing the data that we have, but also our logistics software. And so besides being sort of like, as mentioned, that fulfillment partner, we've just found different ways on how to use our logistics software, so many different ways, that make it fun, engaging, and profitable.
Mhm.
So yeah, so there's a lot of different things that we're essentially doing at the moment that really does rely around our logistics piece, which is one of the reasons why we just launched the newest version about a week ago, which was the most updated version. It's super cool, but yeah, it's really robust and advanced. Mm-hmm.
That's exciting, Ben. I you've probably heard of this company, Amazon.
Yeah, small little shopping app. I
I
think.
don't know if you know this, but um, they started just selling books.
Oops, yeah, yeah,
So I don't think they had the idea they could do. Maybe Jeff Bezos had the idea, but it certainly, to me, it kind of becomes puts Gesture, your company, in a position to be the tail that wags the dog a little bit, to be an important piece of lots of things. But let me ask about one other thing you mentioned, which is, you said you only need a phone number or an email. In other words, you do not need to invade a person's privacy, get their credit card number, get all kinds of stuff. Now, how do you do that? How do you make do with just these little, with just an email or just a phone number?
yeah, absolutely. So during the pandemic, we were, I guess the way that I put it is, we were just another sort of flower alcohol delivery type of application wrapped in a different type of skin. There was really nothing unique or special, I think, other than just it was a cool experience, maybe a different UI. And then during the pandemic is really where we started talking to customers and we started really understanding customers' needs. And, everybody, especially on the business, because we service both consumer to consumer and B2B enterprise as well. And so, we started to notice that people obviously had to go home and work from home and just work in areas that were essentially personal to themselves. And so when people wanted to, especially during the pandemic when they wanted to just, let them know, hey, I'm still here, thinking about you. It was weird for someone to call another person and go, hey, I know you're not at work anymore. What's your home address? And people were kind of like, that's really weird, especially if they were business relationships. It's just not something that people wanted to give out. And so, and we're not the first, company that ever or that essentially invented this process. We've done it 10 times better than anyone else. And so with that, in mind, we kind of took this sort of these pieces that we knew that people typically had was sometimes just a phone number or an email or something that you can find in an email signature almost for anyone. It doesn't matter if it's personal or business. And we said, how do we get this across using, how do we let someone know that, hey, I have a tangible gift for you, and really give the recipient as much control as the sender or even more control. And so we essentially invented something called Smart Send and, put it into use, and the rest is history. And that's basically how we were able to do that. And then sort of one really quick add on to that, my co-founder, Daniel, it was about 3 a.m. one day, and one night he comes in, in the office, and he was working at the office that we were at. And he comes into our little, 2 little desk office. And he said, he was like, I was talking to someone, this is a while back. He's like, I was talking to someone on Tinder, and I told her what we do. And she said, well, if that's really the case, if you don't need any info, then send me something right now. And he said, how would we do that? And I said, well, we would essentially use the same exact technology as if we were to put in a phone number or an email. I said, but instead of doing that, we would just generate that link that essentially is generated for the recipient and allow them to pretty much paste it anywhere they want. And that person just redeems it the way they would as if they received an SMS. And he was like, brilliant, I'm going to code that right now. And so we essentially went to work, started putting it together, and now we're integrated into the majority of all the dating sites. It's a very, very popular function in that area, in that arena.
So what are your metrics like now in terms of users and revenues and other things you're willing to share?
Yeah, so we've been up and running. I will say that we are getting ready to file some stuff with the SEC, so I'm sort of kind of under lock and key with that. But I can talk about our growth metrics. So we've grown quite a bit in the past 4 years that we've been up. Again, 150 cities. During the pandemic, we had probably about a 1,500% growth, which basically I think we have now delivered more than 100,000 gestures at this time. So, with that, we're on track. We have some pretty significant projections for next year, which essentially can be anywhere between 25 and 30 million in revenue for next year. So with that, our ultimately growth plan to really see even a 4x or a 5x growth process by 2024 is to really expand into Canada and Mexico and some of the neighboring countries that are around us here very soon. So we've actually done some deliveries in Canada, so we're starting to test that market and really grow there. So it's really cool. Mm-hmm.
The head of OpenAI, I just saw a video on YouTube recently, and he's the question in front of him was how do you get everyone to use your product? How do you sort of create a success overnight? And he said, you create a service or you have a product that everyone wants to tell their friends about.
Uh-huh.
And it's sort of a very, it's like sort of a beautiful idea, isn't it? It just has to be good enough that you want everyone to have it and you're willing to spread the word, and it's word of mouth. So I think Gesture is, I think we've done about 50 of these podcasts. This is, to me, the most interesting company we've ever
Thank
done
you.
on the accelerator. I really think this has the potential to be a home run, and I think there's a degree of difficulty here that you're pulling off. In particular, it's not like anybody can just wake up and say, "Oh, I think I'll do a logistics network across the country and deliver. I can be able to deliver things in 30 minutes." But the value of that sort of across the board is pretty obvious. So Ben, let me ask you this: how did you come to this moment in your career? What brought you to Gesture? What did you do before Gesture? I know you have your, if you're watching on YouTube, Ben is wearing his ubiquitous Columbia Business School hat.
Yeah.
So he went to Columbia Business School, and some of this happened there. But what's sort of your path and your journey to get this company going?
Yeah. So this is sort of well, to answer sort of the respond before I answer that question regarding the app to tell your friends about. I think it is absolutely indeed the case. I think we've spent a total of about $55,000-$60,000 in marketing over the past 4 years, which is nothing for a company, and grown the way that we have, and that's really what has contributed. Is people are just excited. So
Yeah.
absolutely, I agree with that 100%. So in regards to where this sort of came from, but prior to my experience, I have sort of a different path and journey, not your traditional path and journey. So I grew up with a single mom in Denver, and I basically really started learning ultimately what just sort of this whole hustler culture was about. I saw my mom work 3 jobs, and and to keep a roof over our head. And so when I was 12, 13, 14, I was really just kind of taking care of myself, doing what I needed to do, and just sort of really just thinking about independence and how I can make money. And so it's what really started my entrepreneurial route. And just speaking on a little bit of vulnerability here, I started going around in Denver and collecting old computers. That this is back in 1993, 94. And I would basically take them apart, put them back together, clean them up, put a new operating system, and turn around and sell them for 100% profit.
Wow.
And I put essentially an ad in the paper, and said, cheap computers. And that's essentially what I did to sort of make it through some of my early teenage years. But long story short, I had a son when I was 16 years old, and dropped out of
Wow.
school by the time I was 17. Went to work for fast food, and I went to work for KFC. And by the time I was 18 years old, I had the opportunity to purchase my own KFC restaurant, because of a
Wait,
mentor
wait,
that.
wait, wait, wait a
Yeah,
minute. How did that
yeah.
happen? You had an opportunity. Did you have the money?
No. So when I joined KFC during some of my teenage years, I had an individual that he was a mentor of mine, and he actually owned a couple of KFCs that I was working at. And he said, Ben, you have a really good knack for leadership and management. I don't know if you know that. And at the time, what would I know? 15, 16. I was like, okay. So he said, do you want to become an assistant manager and really start learning stuff? And I was just like, sure, more money, okay, great. And so I essentially learned the ropes in terms of what that looked like. And for my 18th birthday, he said, I will co-sign for you. There's a store for sale if you want it. It's not in the best part of Denver. It has bulletproof glass. Tables and chairs are chained to the ground. It's in really Bloods and Crips territory. And I think if anyone can bring those people together, and just a really sort of tough culture based on Bloods and Crips working together, I think it's you. And so at that point, I went in there, took down the bulletproof windows, and basically got new tables and chairs, and really just had everyone working together, and turned a profit in about 6 months. And so yeah, they were getting ready to close that store, and so I took sort of those earnings, and then went out and bought another one. So I had two by the time I was like 19 or 20.
Wow, that's
And then
amazing. It's an amazing
yeah,
story. And
yeah.
how long did you do that?
I did that until I was about 21, about 20, actually about 20, a little after my 20th birthday. I got out and sold out. And then I just sort of realized that that's not what I wanted to do forever. And not to say that it was anything bad. I still have friends to this day that have made it their career. They've made a ton of money. They're doing really well, but I just knew that there was sort of another track for me. And so I took that and went to school. And
Did you go to college? Did you go to college?
yeah, so I went back, finished high school, and then went to college, and basically went for information systems. And believe it or not, this is, I think, Google was not quite out yet. This is like, it just kind of gives you the
No,
time.
I remember those days. Sure.
Yeah. So Google was under beta, and actually their site was beta, and so it was really interesting. And so yeah, and then it sort of fast forwarding, I then again, just school was like, left that and got into telecommunications, got into IT, left that, got into finance, went to go work for Citi, and essentially was great at math and great at numbers, and ultimately became a trader, and then went to
Hmm.
go work in risk for Citi, and then this is before E-Trade and all those other platforms that were out, and then yeah, I sort of got into higher education, and I became a higher education exec, and
Where
then
was
I
that? Where was that?
yeah, so that was for a college out here in Denver. It was for a big parent company called Alta Colleges. Became sort of a director of admissions and the director of sales, and then I left Denver, moved to New York, and that's really where I would probably say my life pivoted. I took one suitcase, no family, no friends, and just went to New York and
Why? Why
pursued.
did you leave? You're in Denver your whole life. You've had success there. You're
Yeah,
building.
I was about
Why
30
did
years
you?
old. Yeah, I was about 30 years old at the time, and I had always visited New York once a year for the past like 6, 7 years, and I just knew that it's one of those things where like you could feel in your heart that is just like,
I was
man, this is
born in New York, Ben. I grew up in New York, so you're speaking my language.
yeah, and I just knew I'm like I belong here. This is my speed, this is my style, and so I essentially moved one suitcase, nowhere to stay. There's a whole background and story to that as well, but it was really cool. It taught me a lot, but and that's I took a higher education exec job for a big parent company out there, and did that for a couple of years while I went to B school simultaneously, and then I sort of started just getting the itch in terms of getting back into tech, and back in 2014, 15, I essentially resigned cold turkey, and I took a huge step back and went to go work at some of the big tech companies like Facebook and Yelp, where like it wasn't really about the money, it was just really about learning, and that's basically what I essentially did. And it was funny because the people I spent about a year and a half at Yelp doing various roles, sales, engineering, and sales positions and stuff. And so uh, I remember I talked to some of my friends now that I made there, and they said, I remember, you wouldn't go to lunch with us, you wouldn't eat with us, you were just sitting in the corner, you know, um, plugging away at your laptop. I don't know if you were coding, I don't know, if you were putting together a business plan. Here you are, running Gesture now, man. And I'm using Gesture, and I'm just like, and they said, that's just, I remember those days, man. And we used to always think that you were just like this weird person because you were just out there or in the cafeteria by yourself, just sitting there. And I'm like, I was there to learn, in terms of just
Yeah.
understand what big tech was about. So
What, what's so
yeah,
what's
so
so,
that's my
what's so
story.
interesting about that is that at 16, your KFC manager sees your manager potential, puts you in charge of everybody's got to be older than you, pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you're at Yelp, and everybody say, "Oh, that guy, he's kind of a loner. He's not like you won't even go out to lunch with us." But you had it in your mind. What at that point were you designing gesture at that point? Were you coding gesture?
Yeah, so I was actually coding another startup in which I was able to sort of I had a soft exit with that startup. It was sort of a LinkedIn for high school students.
Oh,
Yeah, and basically, high school students are really sort of hard to keep engaged, and so I learned some big lessons with that startup. And the technology was essentially acquired and put to use somewhere else, which was cool. But ultimately. nothing to write home about or anything like that. I don't really claim that as sort of like, oh, this is a huge success opportunity, but it taught me a lot. There was a lot of cool lessons and,
Mm.
really cool things that essentially had happened there. But, ultimately, yeah, it wasn't until I was, in the process of really building that company, and there was an app developer at the time that said, "Hey, can you help me really put together this plan to build a dating app?" And I'm like, "Oh, great, another dating app." And I was like, "Okay." So I started working with him sort of on the side, and from there, he I remember he said, and I said, "Well, you need something tangible. If I match with somebody, I should be able to send them something that basically says, hey, like, I don't need to know where they live. I don't need to know anything about them. It's all done in the app." I said, but sort of a way on just saying, hey, like, I'm really interested in you. And I can't send flowers to 50 people, but I can send flowers to the top two. And it just really shows. And he's like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And then, he essentially decided that he didn't want to do that anymore. And he wanted to build an app for a dating app for people with autism, and focus around
Wow,
that. And I was like,
that's
yeah,
a
and I was
that's
like,
a turn.
yeah,
That's a pivot.
yeah, and I was like, that's amazing. I said, go for it. And he said, well, this is your IP. Take it and do something with it. And I sort of shelved it, and I was like, well, what to do? And then one day I wanted to send a bottle of wine to a friend of mine. She was in real estate at the time, and he was having a bad day, he lost a big deal, and and I said, well, I tried to get online, and I was like looking Postmates and all these different places, and I was like, gosh, this is gonna cost me $90. This is like
Yeah,
$30 bottle of wine, and I'm like, and it can't be delivered until tomorrow, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is
yeah,
just such a broken process. And I said, well, what if I just take what I was essentially working on and start building that, and here we are. So that's really where that
yeah.
kind of came from. Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing story, and it also prompts me to ask you, um, where do you think this journey takes you? I mean, I like if you now that I know your story, and know it so many different pieces to it. And how old are you, Ben?
I'm 43.
43. So,
I
you
know
know,
I
to
look, I
me,
know I look 25, but that's, I'm just kidding.
because
So,
you're 25 years younger than me, you look like a young guy to me. So you still have a lot ahead of you.
yeah.
Um, what does the journey look like to you? Like, where does it take you? Where could it end? Or hopefully it won't end. But where could it? Where? What's the arrival look like when you finally
Yeah. So
arrive?
I think entrepreneurship is a lot like, in a way you say like fashion or building a tech product. It's never finished.
Yeah,
If it's in your blood and it's in your sort of DNA, you're always sort of looking for problems to solve to a certain degree. But so I think in sort of a twofold answer, there was a friend of mine at one time a couple years ago. She said, "Hey, I'd love to introduce you to some my friends and family." And I said, "Sure." And I said that she said, I told them about you, and I told them that you were an inventor. And I'm like, why would you say that? I'm like, I'm not really an inventor. But then she was like, well, sure you are. Like you invent things. And I'm like, gosh, I guess that's when I think of inventor, I think of the guy on the Gremlins, the dad. When he was
yeah,
inventing like the switchblade and like those sort of like the and I and so and I was like, well, I guess that's really
what?
the case. You
Yeah,
are an inventor, and so you're just constantly looking to invent things and essentially put things into operationalize processes and whatnot. But where I think this is going is I definitely know Gesture is headed for this. We're sort of an established company. We're growing up, and I think in terms of exit, we're looking at some an IPO right now and some other things essentially that um, there's some strong possibilities are on the table. But even then, that doesn't mean that it's over. It just means that we're
yeah,
slated for even more growth. But ultimately, I think overall, long term, I really enjoy helping people. I use my
mhm,
Saturdays to help other entrepreneurs, other business owners, and I teach sometimes on Saturdays. I get on Zoom calls and those sort of things and answer
right,
questions. I'll spend 3-4 hours looking at people's decks,
yeah,
and just making sure and giving them feedback and whatnot. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it's just long term overall is just I'd really love to do investing of my own. and helping people just really kick off
Yeah,
their own
no,
goals.
you sound like an angel of VC in the making as well.
Yeah.
Again, when you spoke about um, inventing, you struck a chord with me personally. Um, Not that I'm an inventor because I'm not, but my great grandfather was one of the greatest inventors the United States has ever seen.
Mm.
He died with over 500 patents. His name was Thomas
Wow.
E. Murray. He was a contemporary of Edison. He founded Brooklyn Edison with Edison, with Thomas
Wow.
Edison.
Wow.
So I'd always hoped, oh gee, I wish I had inherited some of that, but no,
Right. Right.
no, I'm more the writer, but I think you are an inventor, and kudos and congratulations on everything you've accomplished. I think it's a fantastic company, and this sort of proves to me, finally, and we're kind of out of time. We could go on about this, but this sort of proves to me how things are about execution. I mean, this is an execution company executing something that's really difficult to execute. So good for you. I hope all your dreams come true. The story you just told me is amazing, and I want to wish you and Jester all the best and all the luck in the world. So thanks for being on the show, Ben.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for allowing me to share my journey and story so far.
Absolutely. I'm Michael Conniff. This is the Accelerator. You can follow me on Twitter at Michael Conniff if people are still using Twitter. I think they are. Or go to michaelconniff.com, michaelconniff.com, my website. You'll also find all kinds of writing, different podcasts on there. So please check it out. And just remember this, we'll be back with another podcast before you know it.